Hi, welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, Journey to Life. I'm Constance Fields, and I'm here with my beautiful co-host, who's also my mom, ArletteJones-Lawson. So today we are going to be diving deep into the world of abusers who happen to be celebrities, and also talking about society's view on those who accuse them.
For years, famous people have appeared to be what seemed like immune from being found guilty or even accused of any type of sex crimes. But in recent years, they've received guilty verdicts at an increasingly fast rate. Some of the public figures who were convicted have received long prison terms and hefty fines, while others seem to have received favor with the court system.
Now, while everyone who has been convicted of sex crimes have become registered sex offenders, those who haven't seen their careers or reputations take a huge hit has been numerous. So how did we get to this point? Who are some of those people? And how has society responded?
Well, the dawn of the Me Too movement has encouraged victims to come forward. Now, it might be surprising to know that the average age for coming forward for victims are about 20 years past the offense. And that is not uncommon. And they've been silent for decades. And you have to remember that years ago, it was taboo to even talk about it publicly. And with the surgence of the Me Too movement, it's liberated abuse survivors to come forward and tell their stories and name who they name. Now, the accusations have led to the termination of employment, lawsuits, and criminal charges. And must say that all the accused categorically deny that any of their sex offenses ever happened.
Yeah, that sounds pretty common too. It's like, you have somebody who recognizes, let's say they get to a point where they see like a Brett Kavanaugh about to be something really major for the country. Let's just take him. And then you have an accuser that comes forward. You have like two sides of, I feel, society who say, well, why didn't this person come out XYZ amount years ago? Why are they now coming out when this person is, about to take on this monumental role, or are they trying to ruin them or something? And I remember seeing an interview that Brett Kavanaugh's accuser gave, and she said that she recognized something. It was something to the effect of, she recognized that he was about to basically be in control of the laws of the land, and she couldn't have, America not know what exactly she went through. And so I think that speaks volumes to the fact that accusers, you're sitting with this knowledge of what has happened to you and the impact of what's happened to you, and you've been afraid to come forward, but now you see your accuser right in front of you, and it's like, okay, yeah, no, I have to say something. It's like that. It's like that with there's a show called Cheer too, and on Cheer, the first season, there was a cheerleader who everybody loved. I mean, he was the best. His name was Jerry. Everybody loved him. I loved him. Well, in season 2, it came out that he was actually sexually exploiting, sexually abusing minors. and taking advantage of his status as this amazing cheer person. And it was sad both for me being a fan of the show and a previous fan of his. It was sad because I was like, you had like all of this and you just like threw it away for, whatever, and then I was sad for the accusers that they had to go through that.
Absolutely. And you know what is interesting? Sexual predators, they are driven by power. And a lot of people say, oh, but they don't have to take it and they don't have to, rape or violate somebody sexually. They can have anybody they want. And that is likely, there is likely a long list of women that would, or men that would, be willing to be their sexual partners. But it's not about that. It's about the power over someone. It's about taking something from somebody that doesn't belong to them because they feel like they can. And I think there's an element of feeling like because they're so beloved or reverenced, that the likelihood for people to believe them is minimal. And the reality is that the abused and the victim, often feels that same way, which, kind of limits their desire to come forward because they live in a world and we live in a world where people like to blame somebody for somebody else's failures. We don't want to blame the ones that rightfully are to blame for their own actions, especially when it's somebody that's beloved, like that cheer coach, especially when it's somebody that, that has impacted our life in such a positive way or, informed how we view our world. We can't imagine that they can come down off of a pedestal that they've been placed on. And the reality is, they're human. And while their mistakes, rob the victim of a lot. Their dignity, their self-respect, their control, it robs them of that which is theirs and theirs to share and decide who they want to share it with. And I think that part of what's happening in society is that we want to choose sides. And oftentimes it's not the side of the person that we know the least, it's the side of the one we think we know the most. And we have a hard time, I think, separating the persona from the person.
Right. And that speaks to the Me Too movement as well, because it's like, yes, I too have experienced having this person that I looked up to or that I held in such high esteem do something to violate me. You're not alone.
Right.
So who else are some more celebrities that you can think of? Who are some other people?
Well, first up is Harvey Weinstein. And in 2018, Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein was arrested in New York and charged with rape. And in February 2020, out of the 5 felonies he was charged with, Weinstein was convicted of only 2. He is currently serving a 23-year prison sentence with his earliest possible release date, late 2039.
Wow. So I think that Harvey is one of those cases that, and I think this kind of speaks to the whole nature of sexual predators, is that there's this don't tell aspect to their crimes People in the circle, the inner circles, they know what's going on, but nobody's doing anything about it
Mhm.
because he has so much power. Like that was the thought process. It's like, oh, well, if you don't do this, then you're not going to get to work in this movie, or you're not going to get to work with this person. And you imagine being like a Hollywood actress just on the scene. Let's say you're fresh out of Kentucky or something. I don't know, but you get over to Hollywood and you have dreams of making it. And this dates back to, decades and decades of starlets that would come over. And there's the old adage of the casting
Mm,
couch.
mm, mm,
It's like,
mhm,
if you don't get on the casting couch, you're not going to make it.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so there's this unspoken rule that was happening with Harvey, and I'm so glad that so many women start speaking their truth about what happened, and that he finally is paying for his crimes.
Absolutely. And honestly, this is just the crimes that he's been accused of and found
Right,
guilty of. You
right.
know, how many more, if you look under the rock, are there? So 2039 sounds like a, a good time to be eligible for release to me.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd be surprised if he made it that long. I don't wish death on
Yeah.
anybody, but I'd be surprised.
Well, yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, well, from one person who has a really long release date to somebody who just got out, let's talk about Bill Cosby.
Okay.
And Bill Cosby was one of those people that all it spans all cultural timelines of people who looked up to him and revered him. But a little bit about him. He's a comedian and actor, and he was convicted by a jury in April 2018 of 3 counts of sexual assault. And he was ultimately sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison and a $25,000 fine. Though Cosby was accused of sexual assault by dozens of women, only one was allowed to file criminal charges. Cosby was released in 2021 when the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out his 2018 convictions. It was decided that the prosecutors violated Mr. Cosby's rights by reneging on an apparent promise not to charge him. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I my whole 20s felt like it was devoted to the Cosby Show.
Yeah.
And my childhood, evolved around Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. I mean, I have been a fan. I think I secretly started liking Jello pudding because of the way that he presented it in the commercials. I mean, I had the highest regards for his contribution to the um, Black community as a whole. He opened a lot of doors for, for a lot of people in the industry. Um, and for that, I am grateful.
Hmm.
But that doesn't change who the man is or was. And,
Exactly.
and at the same time that, that he was doing all these positive things, he was also allegedly doing these really horrible sex crimes.
Hmm.
And he's dropped enough nuggets out there in his interview, about drugging women, that it's not unbelievable to believe his accusers are telling the truth.
Right.
And it saddens me. Um, but I do understand the coming forward later. Like I said earlier, the it's not uncommon for, in fact, it's the average time span from the time that the occurrence happens or the abuse happens or the assault happens to the time that a person is ready to come forward is 20 years plus. So, the fact that women are coming forward, 20, 30, or more years later, that doesn't surprise me. And that's not uncommon. In fact, it's very common. And so I'm saddened by it, but I lean towards believing his accusers for sure.
Definitely. And for me, I share in the sentiments that you have about, what his contributions to our culture and to the world. And, with the Cosby Show, seeing a successful person, play a doctor on TV, but what kind of doctor was he? He was a gynecologist. You know what I mean? So, but I think both can be true, that a person can contribute to society art that is valued, and then at the same time can be associated with such monstrosities as what they have, and that can be hard to reconcile for people. It's hard for me to reconcile.
For sure, but it almost feels like the predator, for lack of a better word, it almost feels as if they feel that to do their good deeds in society is to somehow atone them for all the bad stuff they're doing. So let me do this really horrible thing, and then I'll do this really great thing and feel better about myself before falling back into doing this really horrible thing. And it's almost like, it's almost like a type of confession, when they, when they, do positive things while in the midst of doing and committing these horrible sex crimes. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, how much time he has left on this earth, but whatever he was accused of, if he did those things, which I too lean on the side of believing the victims, then he has to atone for that, and he has to answer for that. It's between him and his God. So, well, who's next?
Jeffrey Epstein. And for more than a decade after his conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor, for which he was a registered sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested again on July 6, 2019 on federal charges for sex trafficking of minors in Florida and New York. Now, he did die in his jail cell by suicide on August the 10th, 2019, as he awaited trial without bail on sex trafficking charges.
I was just going to jump into it. Putting conspiracy theories aside about him, it boggles my mind that there could be a person who is really a fraudulent person. I don't know if you've ever seen anything having to do with like a documentary about him, but there's really a fraudulent person who just happened to be good at talking his way into stuff, could solicit these young girls and then have people, high level, high profile people coming to him to take part in this stuff. And we don't know who all took part. We've seen pictures of him with other people. There are conspiracy theories that he was murdered because he was getting ready to share, but we don't know how many people we as a society actually hold in high regard who were taking part in this stuff. So there's an aspect of me that is like, well, until I see like this person associated with this person, I'm not going to say, and when I say associated, I mean like this is written in his book that something happened. But so many people in the court of public opinion are ready to say you know, XYZ person was with, like, doing this and doing that, you know. Now, for some other people who I won't mention, it's not far fetched. You see pictures of him with other people, and you're like, okay, that tracks. That
Exactly.
makes sense.
Exactly. And you have to think, I mean, he was a very powerful man and had a lot of great contacts in the highest levels, up to the president. And, when people don't know what's happening privately, they kind of willfully, like a willful ignorance of sorts, will go to a party that's hosted by him, especially when, all the who's are going to be there. You know what I mean? It's not, and not everybody that went to his party are guilty of,
Exactly.
sex crimes, you know.
That's what I was getting at. Like,
Yeah,
just because you were at the party, you didn't know what was going on in the other bedroom.
exactly. And now I'm sure those people are horrified
Yeah.
that they even associated with him or didn't see that part of him. But that goes to another element of this, and that's, society's willingness or unwillingness to believe the worst in people that they deem, that they respect at such a high level.
Yeah.
And it's, we forget that these are humans, that are incredibly flawed. And they're not gods. And, and we have to be careful who we put up on that pedestal.
Correct.
Because, there are things and things you don't know.
Right.
And especially with the public figure, a lot of what we know is what they want us to know.
Right. That's why they have publicists.
That's why they have publicists.
I mean, yeah.
That, that represents them in the character that they want the world to see.
Right.
Well,
jumping into his associate, how do you say her name? Jelaine?
I think it's Gayleen. That may be.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, Miss Maxwell.
Miss Maxwell. That's what's important. Miss Maxwell was Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend, and she was actually arrested in July 2020. And she was at her secluded mansion in the U.S. state of New Hampshire on suspicion of having assisted Epstein's abuse of minors by helping to recruit and groom victims known to be underage. And in December 2021, a jury in New York City found her guilty on 5 out of 6 counts, including the most serious charge, that of sex trafficking of a minor. That alone carries a possible 40-year sentence, which means the 60-year-old could spend the rest of her life behind bars. And then the judge has set a tentative sentencing date of June 28th.
Wow. And the fact that she's been found guilty, as far as I'm concerned, by, a group of her peers, she's guilty.
Yeah.
Of it. The fact that her partner in crime committed suicide, is neither here nor there. She still has to pay for her part in it. Right. And I know that for years she was on the run, right? Before they could even catch her and arrest her. She was, missing in action, clearly running from what she knew was going to happen and was about, going to happen in the future. So the fact that she assisted him makes you wonder, makes some people wonder if she also was a victim. Now, I personally don't think she was. I think she was as guilty of being a sexual predator as he, but even more dangerous, because she wouldn't have been looked at in a way that was threatening.
Right.
And her approach may have been motherly. to these young girls, and with the hopes of being, models or actresses or massage therapists, legitimate massage therapists,
Right.
and the opportunity to travel the world. I'm sure that she, put out a lot of carrots. And I think that she's, as dangerous for sure, and even more dangerous because of the package that she comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we need, as society, need to come to terms with the fact that there are sexual predators that are not just all men.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. When you think of a sexual predator, automatically, speaking from here in America, we think, oh, it was a man, and I'm just going to say it. White men, I personally associated white men with sexual predators because that's what I saw whenever I saw stories of that. But this is changing all of that. It's changing it from a gender standpoint to help you realize that, women can be predators too. Women can have this predatory behavior too.
Yes.
And that they can be charged for it. And you can be high profile and be charged for it. So
and convicted
for it. And that's the major thing, because you can be charged and beat the charge, but when you're convicted,
Absolutely.
you can breathe a slight sigh of relief as a survivor. It doesn't take away from what happened to you, but there is this sense of I don't know that retribution is the right word, but a sense of like, okay, they're going to pay for their crimes.
Yeah, it's a cultural change. It's as a survivor myself, there's a cultural change where you feel like, I haven't spoken up in years. I think it takes years to recognize, especially when you're a victim in that way, where they are groomed. It takes a while before they even recognize that what's been done to them is a crime.
Right.
And then to have the courage to speak up takes some more time. You have to get to that place. And I think that, the way that, these cases are coming out more and more, and the landscape and the character of the predators are changing, race and gender. And, and I think that the way that that's happening is helping, our cultural change, where you can, now that they don't all look the same way. Right. And so you have to protect your family, you have to protect your children, and I think that it helps to inform and educate us that monsters come in all shapes and sizes.
Exactly.
So I'm, for one, am really encouraged by her guilty verdict.
Me too.
And I don't know how long she will spend in prison. I know that for the accused, it's not long enough. But that being said, she's where she needs to be.
Absolutely. So we got a few more.
Okay.
Who's next up?
So let's talk about Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. He is also affiliated in that Jeffrey Epstein's world. Prince Andrew was accused of child sexual abuse, and it was alleged that as a minor, the young lady was sex trafficked to him by convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. But in February, weeks before he was scheduled to sit for deposition, Prince Andrew and his accuser reached a settlement in the civil lawsuit. Andrew stepped down from public life amid the fallout from the scandal. And now, subsequently, he was stripped of his titles after more than 150 British veterans wrote to the Queen calling her son an embarrassment.
Now,
Yeah,
you have a thought?
Yeah, well, I for one think that, that he's protected because he's a prince, and he's not in our country, but he's protected because of who he is. Now, the fact that he's been stripped of his titles, that he's, stepped down, that doesn't change the royal aspect and the royalness that's associated with him and his family. He is protected because of who he is.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about the civil aspect of this. He's not in this country, but there have been plenty of people in this country who have not seen a day in a jail cell, but who have paid off their accusers. And for the court of public opinion, from my perspective, growing up, I was like, wait, if this person is getting money, but the other person's not serving jail time that they're accusing, was it just about money? Like, did this really happen to this person, or were they just trying to get some money? And so that is a confusing aspect of the court system that I feel like I understand, but I don't understand. I feel like if you
things.
Yeah, it does complicate things. I feel like if you committed a crime, you committed a sex crime, you need to be punished by going to prison or, going to jail. I understand paying off, paying for the emotional damage, or, if the person needed to go to the hospital, or any kind of treatment that they'll need from what they experience, the trauma that they experience. I understand that now, but I don't feel like any monetary amount can constitute like, oh, okay, this person gets to go on free, living their life, whatever. And yeah, I got a bunch of money, but
well,
that person.
And I think that there are elements that we don't understand, but I think one of the realities is that it is hard to prove a sex crime in criminal court. And a lot of times the only recourse that a accuser has is civilly. And now I know there's a difference between filing a civil lawsuit versus accepting a settlement. They're still all about money, but in a civil lawsuit, the predator can be found guilty. And so there's that element, but then we don't know how much goes into a settlement out of court. There could be threats, I'll ruin you. We all have made mistakes in our life. And, what does that person know? They have the money and the position to be able to hire whoever they wanted to dig up whatever skeletons might be in somebody's closet. And just because a person has a skeleton in their closet does not mean that they're not a victim.
Exactly.
So, we all made mistakes, prayerfully not the ones that impact somebody's life so negatively in that way. But we don't know what all goes into a settlement. And, unfortunately, these people in power have the ability to, to control the narrative and to control how something is going to be resolved.
Yeah.
And do it with money. And I'm not sure that it's fair to paint to paint the accuser, any different, or to rate their abuse or their assault any differently because they accepted money. But I
Yeah.
do get your point. It does complicate public opinion
Yeah.
about how truthful they were. But I believe that they wouldn't have been paid off that amount of money
If
if there
something
were
didn't happen.
elements of truth.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you explained it that way. I think in my head, when I was listening to his experience and his accuser's experience, I was thinking civil, like
Mhm, mhm,
that's the majority of when you think of crimes and punishment.
mhm,
There's the criminal aspect, and then there's the civil
mhm.
aspect. So that's what I was thinking of. I wasn't necessarily focused on settling out of court, which I should have, because settling
Yeah.
out of court it complicates things more to me,
Mhm,
because it's like you're paying this person to be quiet and go sit in a corner.
mhm,
Like,
mhm,
yeah, okay, I did that to you, but just be quiet and don't talk about
mhm.
it.
Exactly. And then you have
So
to understand, I mean, as a survivor myself, I mean, one of the last things you want to do, especially before you heal from it, is talk about it. And for sure, to be publicly talking about it is like terrifying. So for them to offer to pay off with this huge amount of money that can benefit your family, um, doesn't sound like a bad thing. They're
mhm.
acknowledging that what they did was wrong, and they're paying you not to tell anybody.
Mhm.
And that's wrong, but that doesn't speak negatively to the person who's the victim. It speaks more negatively to the person that's paying them off.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Well, talking about controlling the narrative, you mentioned that earlier. Let's talk about R. Kelly. So R. Kelly is a singer who is known for a lot of different songs, like I believe I can fly. He's been accused of sexual abuse, sexual coercion, and physical violence by multiple accusers.
Mhm.
Beyond the allegations of sexual abuse that have followed Kelly for decades, there have been new accusers that have come forward in the past year. And those accusers have alleged that the singer committed acts of sexual coercion and physical abuse. Kelly was found guilty of all 9 charges, spanning decades long, against him, and faces life in prison. Kelly will face sentencing on May 4th, 2022. And until then, the judge has ordered that Kelly remain in custody until he receives his sentence. I have so many thoughts.
Oh, wow. Wow. Me too. Me too. R. Kelly. He's another public figure that, you know, whose contribution to the entertainment industry, he was thought of as a genius, an artist for sure, in the types of songs he put out, and the types of um, movies that are associated with his songs. And, they're all coming from a positive place. And I remember, when, I Believe I Can Fly, came out, and it was like such an amazing song. I mean, it was great.
Even
Um,
Trapped in a Closet. I mean, there's so many
yeah,
songs
yeah,
that
yeah,
like people to this day still like, quote parts of Trapped in a Closet. I mean,
yeah,
it's funny.
yeah. It was funny, and it was almost like he was doing like mini movies, mini movie clips,
Right.
and it was entertaining, and it was, comedic. And but he's been rumored to be a sexual predator for years and years and years, even
Yeah.
dating to Aaliyah,
Hmm.
um, who, rest in peace, was married to him when she was 15 or 16 years old.
Yeah.
And he's been, alleged to have preyed on women, young women, for years and years and years and years. And so the control that he has alleged to have exerted over his victims, is like stunningly is amazing. The types of measures that he went through to control them, to control when they ate, even when they could go to the restroom. I mean, he controlled a lot about them, and to control their body,
Yeah.
was what is alleged to be his right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. It's so he's one of those that makes me itch because I get so irritated. It's not like he was. I don't even know how to articulate what I'm trying to say, because yes, he had some really great hits that are still out there. I don't understand continuing to play his music on the radio. I don't understand that, when there has been so much that has come out of things urinating on people, like young girls, like, I mean, like tons of things that you wouldn't even think of, starving girls, locking them in rooms. And yet there is some subset of society that are still fans. They're still ride or die. They're still,
yeah,
that's, I'm still gonna love his music, and I'm still gonna dance to his music and stuff like that. And that's hard. And it's even harder if you are a survivor to say, wow, guys, this person is about to face a long, he ain't never getting out. That's the hope. He is never getting out.
no.
And you have, that to look forward to, but then there's still radio stations playing his music. There's still people celebrating, his music. And for those survivors, I can only imagine how triggering it is when you have people who are still in his corner.
Well, and two, you have to factor in the fact that some of his accusers don't still recognize that they were victimized.
It's very true.
So some of the ones that are in his corner or are not speaking out don't realize that what was done to them was a crime.
Right.
And the fact that the ones that spoke up, I think speaks to the courage.
Absolute courage.
And,
Yeah.
and the funny thing about society is that when a victim speaks up about a sex crime that a public figure commits, they already know that they run the risk of being ostracized and realized by their accusation. But the fact that they still step up and speak out against it, honestly, I think him being behind bars actually protects a whole new generation
Absolutely.
of people that he could prey upon.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was thinking about, you also have accusers who actually are not telling the truth, who are opportunists. And I was thinking about Chris Brown. Now, Chris Brown has not been charged with anything in terms of sexual assault or rape or anything like that, but he's been accused, like Trey Songz has been accused of these allegations of sexual assault, but nothing has stuck when it comes to that. And most recently with Chris Brown, you had a woman who accused him of rape, and it was in the news a little bit. But then it came out that she had sent him text messages, basically soliciting it, you know what I mean? Like soliciting stuff happening with him and, oh, I can't wait to be with you again and all this stuff. And so then that sways, you know, public opinion again, the pendulum swings and it's like, see, how
Mhm.
can you believe, you know, we say we believe
Mhm.
all, you know, we believe all of the women or men, because there are men who are sexually assaulted as well. We did not touch on that, but there are plenty of them out there. But, you know, who are you to believe? Like, well, how do you know? And so it's hard. Um, and that's why we're not the courts and we're not the detectives and we're not, you know, we're not, that's not
Yeah,
our thing. But they are public figures, so they are open to this kind of, what's the word, banter or fodder, whatever,
yeah,
discussion. They're open for these. You put
yeah,
yourself out there.
yeah. Well, and to some degree, public figures, I mean, by virtue of being a public figure, has agreed to, you know, be targets. And I'm not sure that targets is the best word, but they know that by virtue of being who they are, and um, and that being their livelihood being based on the public and the public's support of them, I think
Mhm.
you have to, you know, when you put yourself out there, I think you have to understand that there are going to be some that are for you and some that are against you.
Exactly.
But they're also need to understand that because they're in these powerful positions, they don't give them the right and the pass
Hmm.
at committing horrible crimes. And
Right.
you don't just get away with it because of that. And
Right.
I think that that is becoming more and more true. And I think the bigger that the Me Too movement gets, that empowers people to come forward and to speak their truth, I think that that will help perhaps minimize the number of um, predators preying on innocent people.
Hmm.
That, you know, I think that the movement helps in that way.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's important that victims realize that just because you have accusers who may be accusing the person for false reasons doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you don't need to come forward because your reasoning is true. Like,
Exactly.
and and I can understand how survivors can feel conflicted because you don't want to put your story out there and say this person did this to me and then have half of society say you're lying, get out of here, you just want money, you know. So
Yeah,
there's a layer of thickening of your skin and soul searching that you have to do before you make the decision to come forward. But just because somebody was lying doesn't mean that your truth doesn't need to come out.
exactly. And also, you know, the thing to keep in mind is that um, one of the one of the problems that plague survivors is that fear of not being believed.
Right.
And when when that's already a fear that you may not be believed, and then somebody comes out that that is lying, then the fear is even, you know, multiplied, because then
Hmm.
are you then going to be looked at in that way? It's already hard enough to come forward, but then to come forward and then to be doubted doubly,
Right.
um, it takes great courage. And you know, I applaud the abused and the victims for coming out and, you know, speaking their truth and, you know, putting themselves out there to be criticized and questioned and, you know, doubted. But there's
Right.
enough people that also believe their truth. That,
Exactly.
you know, there's enough out there that, you know, that leans towards them being the one that's truthful
Mm-hmm.
versus the predator. You spoke earlier about those celebrities or public figures who have not been charged or convicted, but have been accused of sex crimes. And one such is Matt Lauer. Now, he lost his anchoring job of 20 years with the Today Show and may yet still face criminal charges due to accusations of rape by coworkers and other alleged sex crimes.
I love that we're talking about all kinds of different forms of celebrity, because we've talked about TV and film, we've talked about music, we've talked about dignitaries and, you know, the bourgeoisie's people, but now we're talking about news and that kind of media. There could be sexual predators everywhere, even the person that is presenting the local news. And you know, I don't know as much about the Matt Lauer situation. It was something about he had somebody in his office or something, or he wanted somebody to have sex with him in his office. Was that what it was?
It was allegations of rape by a coworker. And since that came out, there have been people who have alleged that he had been inappropriate with them in other ways. And so it leads credence to the fact that she, in fact, may be telling the truth.
Right.
And it was enough for him to be fired. I mean, he was synonymous pretty much with the Today Show, you know, and the fact that that the allegations were and their internal investigations were enough to fire him, especially when you think about the weight of people filing charges of being wrongfully terminated. You know, they don't make those decisions lightly.
Yeah.
And so for somebody of his power and his prestige, and, you know, he has been viewed as a reputable and respected newsman. For them to make the decision to fire him after 20 years, risk the Today Show's ratings plummeting, risk, you know, all the folks associated with the Today Show losing their jobs in case the Today Show failed, which it has not. You know, in his absence, it has not. But I think what it's done is speak volumes about the effects of the Me Too movement and people, companies, you know, recognizing the importance of taking this serious.
Yeah, and adding to that bottom line of this is, like you said, this could potentially ruin our reputation. You gotta go. So yeah, there's this whole culture on Twitter that is like not just about celebrities. It's, you know, regular everyday people. But like if you are accused of something and there's like video proof or something like that proof, like they will put out there where you work, you know, people will contact your employer and you are gone, or where you go to school, they will contact the chancellor and you are gone. You know, that sort of thing. But we also, I want to make sure that we mention, and the only reason why I want to mention Roger Ailes is because when talking about the news, he was like the top of the company. And that ties into power that we were talking about with abusers and how it's just a power thing for them.
Right.
But Roger Ailes, you know, after 20 years with Fox Networks as a CEO, he resigned in 2016 due to accusations of sexual harassment by 23 current and former Fox employees. And in the spring of 2017, he did die. He was in the midst of a Justice Department investigation and a second law enforcement agency investigation of possible financial crimes committed for purposes of concealing the sex crimes.
And I think that goes along with the financial aspect of paying off your accusers. You know, so he allegedly committed crimes to cover up his sex crimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And that sounds pretty familiar for a couple of high profile people.
It does sound a little familiar. So he passed away, you know, in the midst of the whole investigation, which I think then, you know, folks, you know, pretty much stopped talking about him. Like,
yeah,
the crimes he committed somehow like vanished into thin air after he passed. And so the abusers, you know, pretty much had to just move on. And I think that that's a problem, because just because the perpetrator has passed away doesn't take away the harm that they've done.
Exactly.
And the healing that's going to be needed for the abused or for the victim. And I think that, you know, the fact that he passed away and then the conversation kind of steered away from him, I think really kind of does an injustice to his accusers, really.
It really does. It really does. Because, I mean, how do you get justice from somebody who's dead? They didn't die in prison. You know, he slipped and fell down some stairs, you know, supposedly. I don't know. I always think it's weird whenever you have high profile people accused of crimes and other high profile people are associated with that person that could have partaken in those crimes. And then that person who was originally accused somehow mysteriously dies. You know, I always get a little like, that sounds like that could be something else. But I think in his case, he probably did just slip and fall.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that his victims, you know, won't see him pay for what he did. Then I can't imagine that it's any kind of consolation that, oh, well, at least he's dead. No, he didn't. Yeah, I don't have to pay for any of this.
Well, and you know what's so funny is years ago, perverts and predators, you know, folks used to refer to them as dirty old men. Oh, he's a dirty old man. Oh, he's just a dirty old man. And it's like, well wait a minute. You need to dive into the dirt.
Right.
Okay.
Or boys will be boys, or that's just the locker room talk or whatever.
Yes, he's a dirty old man.
Because
he do.
Yeah, because that plays into, you know, how our boys are being raised too. Like if our boys are being raised to know that when you become a grown up and you get a high profile job or you are some high status person of power, that you too can get away with doing all these things and get away with saying all these things and harassing women and men or whoever, harassing whoever, and get away with it, then that is the narrative that they're going to see and hold on to.
It's a spirit of entitlement. You know,
it is.
Their money and prestige makes them entitled to do whatever they want to do, to whomever they want to do it, however they want to do it, and to say whatever they want. And they can control, and there's enough people who depend on them for their livelihood that there's enough people to help cover it up.
Right.
Or there's enough people to look the other way, you know, which is so unfortunate. And I'm just really, you know, hopeful that the culture continues to change in ways that favor the victim. And that folks recognize that coming forward years after is not uncommon. And to recognize that, you know, it takes great courage to speak up. and to be open and honest about it. But I think that that's the only way that we can survive peacefully in this world, is being truthful and honest and speaking our truth. You know, the reality is the only ones that don't believe you, the only ones that you know absolutely know that you're speaking the truth, is the perpetrator, predator. He knows that you speak the truth. So the only ones that maybe doubt you are the ones that weren't there. But you know what happened to you. They know what happened to you. And ever how long it takes for you to come forward. I mean, you have women in their 60s and 70s and coming forward now. However long it takes you to come forward, I encourage you to continue to come forward, because it is important. It's important for you to say it. It's important for you to tell your story. And, you know, worry about who's going to believe you or not believe you at a later time. That's really not your concern. Get your truth out there and walk in peace with it. And, you know, the reality is, you know, if somebody's life is uprooted because the truth comes out about them, that was choices that they made. And they need to own those. Whatever the consequences are, that belongs to them. And, you know, had they wanted a different narrative, then they should have behaved differently.
I couldn't have said it any better. Like, that was exactly what I wanted to pinpoint. And I'm so glad that you said it. And I hope that people listening take it to heart and that they sit with it and make the decision that's best for you, but don't let it be a decision that you're not making out of fear. So I'm so grateful that we were able to have this conversation today. And, you know, it's such an important topic, and we talk about it around the dinner table, but, you know, there's so many other celebrities out there that we didn't touch on, unfortunately. But, you know, this kind of dialogue is important to have. And I feel like people are going to connect with this. So I'm thankful to have had that time with you to do this today.
Absolutely. And we thank you again for listening, for giving up your time to listen to the conversation and what's been said. And, you know, prayerfully and hopefully it resonates with you. And if you've not had the courage to speak out because of being concerned about who you were speaking out against, I encourage you to speak your truth, to say what you need to say, and to walk in your peace. And thanks again for joining us. And we look forward to having more discussions and consulting.
That's it. You said it best.
All right. And stay tuned for our next episode.
Bye, guys.
All right. Bye.